So, to kick off, what are the key factors for you in deciding to sponsor a particular cultural organisation? Is it a commercial initiative? Is it a marketing initiative? Does it sit into CSR? Does it sit into HR? All of these things are starting to blur now. How do you see that working now within your own organisation? And maybe, Helen, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I think I've been with the one company for 16 years now, so I don't think I can speak on behalf of the corporate world in its entirety. But certainly the note that's been struck a number of times so far this morning, authenticity, would be totally number one in my book. And it's authenticity in terms of the quality and the content and the product that the arts organisation is all about. And I think it's being uncompromising and in its commitment to the art form, and this is where I'm going to go a little bit against what has been said so far, and for art's sake as well. Certainly it's been our experience at Wesfarmers that we've really sought for relationships that are based on authenticity and with organisations that are uncompromising in their commitment to artists and to art for art's sake, because we kind of fundamentally have a belief that when art is produced for those reasons, it does connect much more broadly with the community than if you force that, or if your agenda is the other way round. So I think if you look through history, all the great artists and the great designers, the great producers of creative content have worked alone. Producing art is actually a very solitary business for many artists, but it's when you have those moments of great creativity, true creativity, that really touch a nerve with society. That's the kind of opportunity, those are the kinds of moments and the kinds of partnerships and relationships that we have felt are important to achieve and to go for.
So Wesfarmers Arts sits alongside the Wesfarmers organisation?
It's a small department within Wesfarmers. Within
Wesfarmers,
yeah.
Okay. And Fady, you're sat entrenched within marketing at Telstra. So when you've got things like thanks driving very clear revenue and customer satisfaction metrics on one side, and you've got other kind of arts and sponsorship things on the other side, how does that sit within marketing?
Yeah, I think Kate mentioned it. I think that line is blurring. So I think sponsorships is an old world term, and I think checkbook sponsorship is fast dying. So, for me, you can see in the title, we don't have sponsorships anymore. We're trying to take that word out of the vernacular. So it really is about loyalty and partnerships. And I inherited the sponsorship portfolio about 6 months ago, and I think one of the things I struggled with is we had these sponsorships and we were paying for branding, and we had a thanks program that was essentially trying to connect customers to those brands. So the first thing I did was meld those two together, and I don't see a difference between what I do in the loyalty space and what I do in the partnership space, because I need both to make that work. I think your earlier question is, why do we sponsor anything? We don't. We partner now. I think sponsorships is gone. It really is. Was it Kate that mentioned that earlier? It really is gone. So the question I always ask myself is, why would I sponsor anything? And not art specifically, or music, or sport, or movies. But what I do know is that in the last 3 months, every 3 months roughly, 45% of our base interacts with the arts community. That's about 5.5 million customers. And my job is to connect customers to the things they love and their passion points around art. And so that's kind of the driving force of why I would sponsor anything or partner with anybody in the arts industry.
Okay, and Emma?
Yeah, I'm nodding my head because that's exactly the same in terms of the driver. From a marketing perspective, at Macquarie Centre, we've just done this $440 million redevelopment, and along with that came a huge amount of research in where our consumers spend. And while, 50% of that was on retail, we also knew that a good chunk of that other 50% was on arts and culture. So we needed to look at ways where we could really connect and partner with, well, for my sake, the MCA, to be able to connect and drive more of an emotive connection to the centre, and bring that so that we connect with our customers.
So we've discussed ROI in some of the previous conversations, and it seems like there is almost the ability to kind of trend away from some sort of financial accountability or return. But we can't just move away from ROI completely. So what is it that's in it for you guys as we move forward? And actually, is there an ability to be even more accountable with some of the partnerships that we're taking on?
Being backed by AMP and super funds basically own the shopping centre, so of course it always comes down to the dollar. But the way that we actually measure the ROI in this case is more about engagement. And I think that's what's important, because the more engaged our consumers are, the more likely they're going to come in centre and spend. And so we can do that in any ways. How many people turn up to the number of activations that we have, what the open rate is of our EDMs, ticket sales, etc. So that's how we measure it there.
Fady?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an ex-finance person, so I'm just conscious of that. And you know, one of the things I don't want to do with my team is kind of default into the whole finance world. But I think if you want to measure pure financial ROI, this is my personal views, I think you're kidding yourself. I don't think relationships between sponsorships and ROI are that linear, and you can measure it. So what I would say is think about why you sponsor things and have that as your KPI. So for us in Thanks in particular, we care about what we call experiences redeemed. The program is now 3.5 years old. We've had 7 million redemptions in the program. And what I do know is that anyone aware of Thanks is 30% more likely to recommend Telstra. If they're aware of the program and buy a ticket or redeem an offer, they're twice as likely to recommend. That's my ROI. That is the business problem. That's where I focus all my energy. So just be very crisp on what you're trying to measure, and make sure that ladders up to the organisational objectives, or the CEO's at least objectives, and feed that up. So for Telstra, NPS is a huge issue. So I focus all my energy around NPS and measure that as my pseudo ROI.
And Helen, I was reading on the Wesfarmers site, a lot of, or at least some of the words that were dedicated on that site were to being able to help some of your employees experience more in the arts, and that's kind of seen as quite valuable. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would just back up what Fady said as well too, in that ROI, which is a term I never actually use, but it is really about, is going to be different for each partnership and each corporate entity. And certainly with Wesfarmers, we're not aligned with a particular product or a particular service. It's the ROI, if you would like to say it, for us is more about being associated with quality, is more about being associated with innovation and artistic integrity. And to go back to the point that you just raised now, our employee engagement, I guess, is a huge part of that. We now have, across the group of Wesfarmers, 205,000 employees, if you count all of the businesses under Wesfarmers, and making sure that each of those employees, in whatever capacity is possible, can have an enriching cultural experience is kind of one of my number one drivers. And we certainly know that through the relationships that we have formed and pursued over many, many years with our partners, some of our people are having their very first experience going into an art gallery or into a concert hall through the relationships that we're building up with organisations. So those are actually really important experiences to us, and it has that knock-on effect too of helping to place Wesfarmers as an employer of choice in terms of the opportunities that are available to our employees to engage with artists and creatives. So that's a hugely important part of it. What I personally believe is the most important driver for what we look for and what we want to do with our arts partnerships is to somehow change the playing field out there and the cultural landscape to provide services or opportunities or projects that are kind of just waiting out there ready to happen but haven't had the resources put into them. So putting in R&D support into organisations to do new initiatives is absolutely the number one driver, I guess, for how we have conceived of the Wesfarmers Arts program over the last 20 years, I suppose.
Great. So a slightly cynical question. How much are arts partnerships, and some people will still call them sponsorships, I think, driven by a leadership agenda? So, you know, the CEO, I think almost you said, like, you know, NPS is a very big thing for Telstra. But how much of it is driven by top-down, they have a passion about the arts, and then so therefore the rest of the organisation has to work out how to make that passion happen for them? And also, you know, how much of it is just good corporate citizenship?
Well, it certainly hasn't been that way.
I don't expect anyone to implicate their own CEO.
No, I just think that AMP Capital, it's very finance driven. So it actually took a fair bit of, through the research that we had, it took a fair bit of selling upwards to really engage them and you know, sell the idea of and the concept of partnering with the arts and why that was a worthwhile idea. But we did need to go into other factors like who was their audience and how are we going to capture them to become customers as well. So in the end it did come down to how targeted we could be and how we could convert that into a dollar. But they also began to understand the broader reasoning behind it. Yeah.
Fady?
Yeah, I think I could sit here and bullshit and not be authentic. The reality is absolutely. I mean, yeah. Sometimes you have senior leaders and they're the ones with the purse strings, and I'll come up to you and say, do this. And I think you need to be cunning, not shut that down. I think how do you then take that passion they have and wrap it up and turn it into an opportunity into the program? So yeah, Andy Penn, our CEO, absolutely loves the arts, and you know, we've put a new arts pillar in thanks not because Andy loves it, because I think, you know, it made us look a little bit differently about our partnerships, and what we found out was more people interacted with the arts than they do with NRL and AFL combined. So he opened my eyes, and why not use that passion to turn it into something more useful? So we're trying to make implement a bigger play in that industry. So yes, it does happen. I think embrace it rather than run away from it, and see if you can weave it together, join the dots and build something a little bit bigger out of it, rather than just do one-off bespoke events for your senior leaders. That would be my advice. Helen?
I think leadership is a really crucial issue and can be harnessed to really considerable effect. Certainly at Wesfarmers, the leadership in the company has championed the arts right from back in the 1970s. So, and that's gone through successive managing directors and boards and chairmen of the company. But it's something that I think has, you know, passed down the generations of leaders in the company because they can see the actual value of a robust and integrated engagement with creative people and creative thinkers outside the sphere of business. So it's kind of almost not needing to or wanting creative people to accommodate themselves to business, but to, I guess, you know, learn something about professionalism and success and ambition and achievement in very different spheres of intellectual pursuit. Having said all that, you know, every leader that you have, I've worked for now 2 managing directors, Michael Chaney first and now Richard Goyder, And they each have very different approaches and very different interest areas. And so, you know, one of the things I think is very important is to engage the leader in the life of a partnership. And, you know, when it comes from top down, it's much easier to convert the rest of the, you know, of the hierarchy as well, because that person is engaged or believes it and is setting the path, I guess, and opening the agenda.
Okay, so we talked a little bit before, and also in the previous talk, about the importance of creativity, and actually the arts is a great opportunity for businesses to try and attach themselves to some sort of creativity, and maybe even learn some ways to kind of be much more creative. When you kind of look at partnerships that you see either within your own businesses or in the world in general, how creative really are the partnerships between enterprise and arts institution? You know, too often I think maybe perhaps to the untrained eye, you'll see that really most of these sponsorships turns into a logo fest. But what is it that, what can you kind of point to where successful partnerships have really taken place that actually things now are, we've moved way beyond those times? Helen, would you like to?
Yeah, I think we have moved considerably beyond that. I mean, I'd probably like to point out a particular partnership, if I may, between Wesfarmers and one cultural institution, National Cultural Institution, the National Gallery of Australia, that we have been, I guess, probably from nearly 8 to 10 years now involved in, that came out of a conversation between two people from very, very radically different backgrounds, one from an Indigenous cultural background and the other, you know, from an Anglo-Saxon sort of arts management background. That's me. But the conversation was really initially about what could two leading institutions, one from business and one from the arts, do to make a true difference to the Indigenous visual arts sector in Australia and the challenges that sector faces over the next 100 years. And so a terrific partnership has fomented over many years, and with a lot of consultation, a lot of thinking, and to be quite frank, a lot of development and change and tweaking of the processes and the models. So I'm happy to talk to people about this wonderful relationship with the NGA over the Indigenous Leadership program after this. But I think that's a very good example that, you know, we're a partnership, and you would, I'm sure, have experiences with your own partnerships as well, is that the best ones don't necessarily come quickly or come easily, but they are embedded and they are ingrained, and they are ones where you're both going into some unknown territory, but with very much a focus on what you want to achieve.
Okay. Emma?
Yes, no, I completely agree that it really is more about logos. I think from a consumer perspective, people are becoming more savvy. They don't really care. They don't really look at those things anymore. I think they just, it becomes blind nothing. So you need to do more. And I think that from a marketing perspective is very exciting, because we can look to broader things. I mean, even the way that property now, retail property is looked at and built and created. We have, I heard placemaking mentioned in the previous session, and that's one of the key focuses at each of the centres that have been developed. So we've partnered with artists to create particular placemaking little, you know, areas where people can rest and visually be inspired within a retail environment where that wouldn't normally be something that would have ever been considered before. And I think that that's what's quite exciting, and really then leverage it. We can leverage our partnerships further from each of those little placemaking, those items. Yeah.
Fady, how creative do you get at Telstra?
I think partnerships is like any relationship. You need to think about what you want out of it. And I'm not going to pick on the MCA because they're one of our partners now, but I'm giving an example of what we did try to do in music. So what we had in music was sponsorships with promoters and different industry people and labels, and they're kind of all bespoke and one-off, and they weren't quite going anywhere. So, the question we asked ourselves is, how do we play in the industry? I mean, Telstra is unusual. I mean, it's a big organisation. It's almost like Switzerland, so it has a bit of a right to play and bring people together in that space, if you like. Because what we found is the music industry kind of didn't want to talk to each other. They were competitive, and rightly so. So we kind of thought about a model where, what are they trying to solve from a business objectives, and what are we trying to solve? There's got to be a common ground. There always is. So we kind of said, what's that thin layer that we can build and apply in that industry? And 6 months ago, all the promoters, there was absolutely no way they'd all be in one room together. All of a sudden, they're working on the Thanks platform. Why? Because they need to sell tickets, and the Thanks marketing platform is a great engine to connect customers to the things they love. So yeah, I think about it not just as a bespoke one-off, but can you build industry platforms? Everything's about a platform. Don't try and do too many one-off bespoke things. So ladder them up so they connect, and whatever they're trying to solve for, whatever you're trying to solve for, it works. Because what happens then, there's natural tension to want to make it work. If I have to work to push the partnership along, then we failed, not the partner, because I failed to find a way to make it connect or plug into the Telstra objectives.